Why does it feel so uncomfortable to be bored? Over the past few months, I've realized I'm always either scrolling on my phone, listening to a podcast, watching a video, or keeping my mind stimulated in some way so I'm never bored. It makes me wonder, are we just built this way? This thought process reminded me of a study that I heard about. The study happened about 10 years ago and it was pretty straightforward. Some researchers got participants and they put them in an empty room with no one and nothing to keep them occupied. And in front of them, the researchers had a button, and this button would shock the participant if they clicked it. The person was then left unattended in an empty room with just the button for 15 minutes. What do you think they did? 67% of the men and 25% of the female participants pressed that button at least once. They knew it was going to hurt, they knew that the button would shock them, but they pressed it anyway. One participant even pressed the button 190 times in 15 minutes. This experiment illustrates that humans would rather feel pain than feel boredom. So there is definitely something going on in our minds that makes us avoid being bored. One of the researchers said something that I think was quite interesting. He said, when we don't give our minds anything to focus on, it's kind of hard to know what to do. The way I interpreted that quote is, it's not so much that it's painful to be bored, it's painful instead to not know what to focus on. Our discomfort with boredom is discomfort with ourselves, an existential unease that social media exploits. I think this is why we have so much more social media addiction nowadays, because people don't know what to focus on. And it's so hard for us to know what to focus on when we have our phones to distract us from figuring that out. We're stuck in a loop where we don't know what we want to focus on, so we distract ourselves with our phones because it's too uncomfortable to think about. But because we're distracting ourselves with our phones, we can't figure out what we should do. It's this death spiral where we will always just find ourselves wasting our time scrolling and avoiding thinking about this uncomfortable thought because it's just too much pressure. So to really break out of this loop, we need to distance ourselves from our devices for long enough to ask some very important and introspective questions. Specifically, you need to ask yourself, am I living meaningfully? You need to try and understand, what is my purpose? And am I truly happy, or am I just distracting myself? This discomfort with being bored and being in silence, it might seem kind of trivial at first, but I think it reflects something deeper about human nature. And I think this is what social media understands how to exploit. I think the fact that we get bored and we need some kind of mental stimulation is actually so important. And I think it's one of the reasons why humans have been so successful over the past how many thousands of years. It's because we need something to stimulate us. We need our brains to work on a problem. This explains why we see cave paintings from 20,000 years ago, why we see inventions and artwork and cell phones, the internet, and now AI. It explains why we have seen such huge technological and cultural advancement over the thousands of years that we've been alive. Boredom might be one of the most important characteristics of being a human. But because of modern technology, modern smartphones, and social media, we are now being exploited in some way. Social media and smartphones have only really been around for the past 20 years or so, and attention spans have been plummeting ever since. By having these small little dopamine machines in our pockets all the time, we find it harder and harder to come up with these amazing ideas as individual humans. So if being bored is such an important part of being a human, and it pushes us to do amazing things like create art and technology, then it almost feels like we don't have full control over what we choose to focus on. And to me, that's what social media is exploiting. Just like that shock experiment we talked about, where someone shocked themselves 190 times in 15 minutes. I think the people that are most addicted to their phones are the ones that are also the most purposeless and unsure of where to put their time and attention. And so they choose to bury themselves in their devices so that they can have some form of distraction. Our discomfort with silence isn't new. It is fundamentally human. Smartphones didn't invent our existential anxiety. It amplifies our deep-rooted human fears, Think of how much people respect a monk for being able to meditate for days and days. It's so impressive because it sounds like torture, in the same way that it literally is torture to put prisoners in empty rooms with no stimulation. And speaking about prisoners, it makes me think about Plato's cave analogy. The story goes like this. Imagine there are a group of prisoners that have never seen the outside world. They're chained inside a cave, facing a wall, and that's all that they can see. Behind them, there's a walkway, and behind the walkway, there's a fire. Every now and then, people on the walkway behind them walk past holding some objects. And the fire projects the shadows of the objects onto the wall that the prisoners can see. Over time, all that the prisoners see are these shadows projected on the wall in front of them. And they start to believe that the shadows in front of them are actually reality. At one point, one of these prisoners is able to escape, and he goes into the outside world and he sees real objects for the first time. He sees things like trees and wagons and animals and the sun. And he realizes, oh my God, this is reality. So he quickly goes back to the cave to tell all of the other prisoners what he's discovered. But they don't believe him. All they've ever known are the shadows projected on the wall. So how can they believe all of the things that this prisoner is telling them? It's beyond anything that they can comprehend. The story might sound like it doesn't really relate to phone addiction, but it does. So many of us have grown up with phones and social media. It's so normal for us now. It's so easy for us to mistake things like comment sections and IG influencer posts as genuine human connection. People really get pulled into these weird little rabbit holes. But when you really step back and think about it, a lot of the time that we spend on social media is wasted. We think it is reality, but in a lot of ways, we're not getting any real benefit from it. Just like the prisoners mistook the shadows for reality, we mistake these online social interactions for real meaningful connection. In a way, are we really prisoners chained to our phones, and we've just convinced ourselves that endlessly scrolling is somehow a meaningful way to live? Personally, I consume a lot of YouTube videos. A lot of it is more like business and economics related videos, but still, I watch a lot of content. And I wonder, why is that the case? Why am I spending so much time scrolling and watching random YouTube videos when I could be reading or focusing on a personal project? I think in a lot of ways it's because I haven't really known where to put my time, what to focus on, and what to really try and build. Like I said, it's just so easy to avoid thinking about these things. The first iPhone came out in 2007, and social media as a whole hasn't really been popular for more than like 20 years. Thinking about how big it's gotten in such a short amount of time, honestly, is a little bit shocking, specifically because of how much we use it. The average person spends about 2.5 hours a day on social media. With that amount of time, we have to ask ourselves, what are the long-term health implications for us? When I think about the effect that cigarettes and even cocaine have had over the course of history, it's pretty insane. There was a period where doctors used to prescribe cigarettes to people, and it was seen as completely safe. There were times where cocaine was in Coca-Cola, and people thought it was completely fine and healthy. There was a time where wristwatches contained highly radioactive materials so that it would glow in the dark, and people thought that was completely safe. What I'm trying to say is, social media has not been around for very long, and it's so easily accessible. We spend so much of our lives on it, and we have no idea about the long-term health implications. Back in 2021, when the Facebook files released, we found out that Facebook knew that Instagram was causing 1 in 3 teenage girls to have body image issues. They knew this, but they kept it a secret. We only found out because of this leak. I think this reflects pretty accurately to how the cigarette industry knew that cigarettes were bad for people's health, but they kept that a secret. That oil and gas companies knew that oil and gas was bad for the planet, but they kept that a secret. So, what are we really exposing ourselves to on a daily basis? What are the negative health implications for us? Historically, humans eagerly pick up and embrace new technologies without fully understanding the consequences. Smartphones and social media are not just addictive, they might actually be reshaping the way we think and act. The fact is, we won't fully understand what's really going on until there have been long-term studies done. But I feel like we don't need scientists to tell us something that we can figure out on our own. If you're spending too much time on your phone, you know that already. If you think your phone usage is fine and it's not an issue in your life, then that's fine too. I don't think social media is all bad. It helps us stay in touch with our friends and families. It helps us learn new things. It can definitely be a net good in people's lives. We just have to be truly mindful of how much time we're wasting and how much time is actually truly valuable spent on those platforms. The first step to really understand if you're spending too much time on your phone is to embrace a little more discomfort in your life. Try and reduce your screen time, set screen time reminders. Try and leave your phone at home when you go for a walk, or when you're washing the dishes, try and do it in silence. I've personally found journaling to be pretty helpful, where I take 10 minutes out in the morning and have nothing to distract me, have a pen in my hand, and just write down what I think and what's going on in my mind. You don't even necessarily have to write anything if you can't think of anything to write, but just sitting there for 10 minutes alone can be really helpful. But in the end, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution for reducing your screen time. It's all a matter of what works for you. So to be honest, there are so many solutions out there. Everyone talks about reducing screen time, but at the end of the day, you have to be the one to want to take that action. So next time you try and reach for your phone, I want you to have a real think about why you might be reaching for it. Are you trying to avoid a difficult piece of work? Are you just checking a message? Or is it something deeper? Is it something that you're avoiding thinking about? It's important to unpack these feelings to truly know where your head's at. These uncomfortable thoughts might help you figure out exactly what you should be focusing on. So with all that being said, I know that this was a pretty deep and introspective video. I really enjoy talking about these philosophical ideas, and if you like thinking and talking about these things as well, then I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you want more thoughts and ideas like this, please let me know. But with that being said, I guess it's time to put your phone away. Thanks.